to be here.
It's on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Thanks. It's great to be here on such a special day. The one day of the year when we don't hear any protests. The one day of the year when we are all united. We all one. Because it is the day that is special to Australians. We want to recognise those 60,000 who lost their lives in World War I. The 27,000 who lost their lives in World War II. And for all those who continue to give as they serve our country in peacekeeping and other places throughout the world today. There has not been a conflict since the world, well, we'll say the Boer War, that Australians have not been involved in. So we have been involved in every major conflict and in peacekeeping throughout that time. So we've been very fortunate to be able to have today to thank him and to thank those who have gone before us. Today I want to talk about heroes. And I'm going to ask Kim to put up a list of some of the readings that we've got. And I've got people who are going to help me this morning with our time together. First of all, I put some thoughts together about heroes. I'm going to ask Coral now to start and just share that with us this morning.
Heroes. We live in a culture that's living in search of real heroes. In fact, I'm sure we don't know what a real hero is anymore. We use the term very loosely, and I think that we are in a culture that has an overabundance of celebrities and very few heroes. As historian Daniel J. Booston pointed out, celebrities are people who make the news, but heroes are people who make history. Time makes heroes, but dissolves celebrities.
Thanks, Coral. It's just a few thoughts that I had about today. And I wanted to talk about a hero today. I wanted to talk about a hero who is a favourite of mine. And we'll go through this hero's life very briefly and just look at some of the things that this hero had to deal with in his life. Thanks, Coral, for that. That gives us a preamble to what I'm about to talk about today. And so people are going to bring to us readings as it makes it easier for me. We're going to go through and see and follow the life of this person. And the first reading we've got today is from Cheryl, and she's going to bring us Genesis 37. And
Can I do it from here?
yeah, sure. People can see it, it'll be up there.
But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes a dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't share in the blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornated robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilgal. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay her hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of his cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Cheryl. Who's got siblings? They're always lovely, aren't they? There's never a problem with your siblings, is there? They're always very amenable and they'll agree to whatever you want, and there's never a problem. You don't have arguments or anything. No, of course that's normal, isn't it? I don't think. It wasn't much different in this family either, because there were 12 brothers until the last came, and you know who I'm talking about, Joseph. Joseph was the result of the love between Jacob and Rachel, and so he was the favourite. And because he was the favourite, he got spoiled. And he got special clothes, as we know. He got special favours by the parents. He became what we would call in Hebrew a little snob. He wasn't liked very much. Why? Because he wanted to keep on demonstrating to his brothers these dreams that he had and telling them all about them. And the dreams were concerning all these sheaves of wheat bowing down to him and sort of making himself to be this self-important person. And I suppose that doesn't go down too well. And so after a while, they saw an opportunity to get revenge or to get even with this little terror of a kid that they couldn't take anymore. They were going to kill him until Reuben stepped in. Said, let's not do that. They threw him in the pit. And then some traders came past, the Midianites, and so they sold him to the Midianites. I'm going to ask you now, how would you feel? How would you feel as you're strung over that camel, put into this net, and looking out and seeing your only family that you ever knew? When you think that they were really wanting to kill you before that. Sometimes I felt like throttling my brother, but never got to that part. And probably he for me. But how would you feel? I'm slung across this camel, and as I'm swaying and lurching and going away, I'm leaving behind all that I've ever known before. My parents, my home, nothing is left. I'm going to be sold on an Egyptian slave market. How would you feel? Let's move on. And we'll go to our third reading, which is from Genesis 39. Renee, I think you've got that one. Is that correct? Thanks.
No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her.
I'll just fill in the detail. Joseph had been bought from the slave market by the captain of the palace guard, Potiphar. And he became a very studious and a loyal servant in that household, to the degree that he rose in rank and was able to have more authority than when he came. He was a young man. He was obviously a good-looking guy. And he attracted the attention of Potiphar's wife. Now, she could have whoever she wanted, but she wanted Joseph. She made arrangements so that all the servants would be away, and so she approached him. and begged him. Now I guess she must have been not a bad sort, so he would have been interested sexually, but he refused. He refused for two reasons. First of all, as he said in that reading, how could I offend my master who has given me all this? And secondly, how can I offend God? That's the most important. God is the most important person in my life. So how can I offend him? And so because of that, she realised that she couldn't get away with Joseph at any rate. And so she fabricated a rape story. And of course, are they going to believe a slave to the wife of Potiphar? No. He was thrown in jail. In the Egyptian jail, it certainly wasn't the Mercure or the Hyatt. I'm sure it was pretty rough and pretty hard. Joseph is now in jail for something he hadn't done. How would you feel? How would you feel? First of all, I've been sold and taken away from my family. I've worked hard to try and be the best I could, and now I'm in jail for something I haven't even done. How would you feel? Let's have a look at our next reading. And it's in Genesis 40. And it's the cupbearer and the baker. Kim, I think you've got that one.
Which one?
Genesis 40, was it?
I've got Genesis 41. Is the next reading.
Oh, okay. What is that one?
And the plan seemed good to Pharaoh for all his efforts.
Oh, no, that's moving on. So it's Genesis 40, 20 to 22.
I've got that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's right, you've got that one. Thank you. I'll have that then.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
40, 20 to 22. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. So that.
Thanks. While Joseph was in prison, also in prison were the chief baker and the cupbearer. And you all know what a cupbearer was, don't you? Do you know what a cupbearer was? Cupbearer in those times was the person who had to test to see whether the wine or the drinks were poisoned. He had to try them first before the king or the pharaoh was given those cups to drink. Because, as you realise, if they were poisoned, the cupbearer would die and not the king. And there was plenty of intrigues and coups d'etats going on in the palaces around about that time. So it was quite common for the king to be tried to be disposed of in ways that was like poisoning his wine. And so a cupbearer was essential. Now, while they were in prison, they talked to him about some dreams that they had. Joseph was able to interpret the dreams, and then we find the king inviting them to this banquet, and the dreams then became true. They all came as Joseph said. The cupbearer was restored, and the baker was killed. Now, all this happened while Joseph was in prison. And then they said that when it came to Joseph's time, they would remember and they would let Pharaoh know how they had received their dreams, been interpreted, and they would not forget Joseph. 2 years had passed, and Joseph had heard nothing. And now we come to the third reading, the fourth reading, which is Genesis 41, 37 to 40. Thanks, Kim. You've got that?
And the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So the Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one whom is the Spirit of God?" The Pharaoh said to Jesus, "Since God made all known to you, there is no one discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne, I will be greater than you."
So Joseph has now been made second in charge of Egypt, with only the Pharaoh above him. Joseph has been in prison. He made friends with the cupbearer and the baker, and he'd interpreted their dreams, and they promised that they would tell Pharaoh, but they didn't. But they didn't. So how would you feel? How would you feel now? I'm here unjustly. I've been promised that they would tell the Pharaoh. They didn't. And then the Pharaoh had these dreams, and none of his court magicians and priests could interpret them. But then all of a sudden the cupbearer thought, what about that Hebrew guy that I met in prison all those years ago? And so he mentioned it to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked Joseph to come into his presence. And he explained the dreams to him, and Joseph interpreted the dreams perfectly. And Pharaoh could see that this was the answer. So he thought, I need somebody of this caliber to be running this country to prevent this famine, which has been forecast, which is coming. How would you feel now? Now, how would you feel? Who has been faithful? Who has been faithful to God all these steps up to this point? Joseph. Joseph has been the hero. He's the one who stood for God. He's the one that let nothing come in between him and his love and his service for God. And now he's been vindicated. God had this plan for him all the way through. And now it's been realised. So, how would you feel? I certainly would feel a lot different than when I felt when I was slung into that camel all those years before. Being felt that I was abandoned. We come now to the famine which is increasing throughout the land. And Joseph had asked the Pharaoh if he could allow his family to come and receive some of the grain that he had already prepared and stored for the country. And he was given that approval so his family were contacted. And let's see Joseph with his brothers. Janet, I think you've got that one in Genesis 45.
Genesis 45,
Verse 6.
For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no ploughing and reaping.
And so the Joseph and his brothers came down, Joseph's brothers came down to Egypt to find out how they can receive some of this grain that had been stored. Can you imagine that meeting when the brothers came into his presence? Because he was the man in charge of this distribution. And so all people would have to come before him and his officials. Don't forget, Joseph wasn't just there alone. He had a court for himself. And when they came, they would not have recognised Joseph, because he had been an Egyptian for 30, 40 years by now. And so he wore the headdress of the Egyptian. He didn't have a long beard, he'd shaved. And so he was nearly unrecognisable from whom they knew so many years before. And so the brothers did not know who it was that they were talking to. And Joseph was quite upset when he saw them. And he didn't know how to continue. But eventually, he revealed himself to them. And after a series of things, reconciliation was made between them all. So how would you feel now that the brothers are in your possession, in your presence, and you have control over them? You've control over their life even. You don't have to give the word and they would have been killed. He could help them or not. Or he could take revenge. And he'd say, now is my time to get square. But let's see what Joseph decided. In Genesis 50, 16 to 21, Carolyn's going to bring that to us.
So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them.
Thank you. Is that a fitting end to that story? For that 20 minutes that we've gone through, that story of the life of this man? Isn't he a true hero? Someone that you can be proud of? Somebody who stood up for what he believed to be right? Somebody who stood up for the truth? Somebody who stood up for the faith that he had in the God that he trusted in and believed in. How often today do we need heroes like Joseph? In Numbers 6, I don't know whether you've got that one.
No, you didn't give me that one. Right?
Oh, okay. The writer says, "May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord shine on you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord show you his favour and give you his peace." Amen. Thank you, Carolyn.